Okay people, enough is enough. We've been doing this YouTube thing for what now, about 2 years? And we don't even have a sincere series of list videos? People love lists. They like to see things put in some sort of hierarchy of stuff that is stuff out of stuff. We did some parody videos a while ago on this channel, but some people didn't like them because they wanted to see a real list, because people need to see things listed. So that's what we're doing. This is the Sterlist, which will be coming to you via the Jimquisition brand. That's why I've got my stuff on. Kind of. Well, and an official Jimquisition t-shirt. Why not buy it today? Anyway, this is coming to you via Patreon, so ad-free. If I remember to turn the ads off, if I do forget, do let me know. But anyway, let's get to the topic. Game publishers are loving the re-release thing lately, the double dipping, the going back for more, all of that stuff. They want to see double their profits for the same amount of work, really. So let's look at some games that actually deserve it, shall we? Because some of these re-releases coming out, like the prototype Biohazard bundle, really aren't required. So I could put together 5, count them, 5 games that actually deserve a re-release on the PS4 and the Xbox One. And PC as well, why not? Let's get to it. 1. Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts is one of my favourite RPGs of all time. I actually discovered it while browsing. I used to do this when I was unemployed. I used to browse, I used to trade in games and get store credit, and then I'd browse the cheapo bargain bins to just find random games that looked interesting just based on their cover. And sometimes you can judge a book, or in this case a game, by its cover, because I picked up Shadow Hearts, looked interesting, the first cutscene alone was balmy as fuck. The series is out of its mind. It's a game in which an angry man turns into monsters because of some reasons. There's an old pervert there, there's a vampire man, there's a religious girl who fights with a book, and you've got to try and stop everyone from losing their minds. You fight God at one point. Shadow Hearts 2, very similar, better production values, but no less just off the wall. As you fight all sorts of religious sects and dabble in angel killing and all this kind of stuff. It's vastly entertaining. I highly recommend it. It's got a really nice soundtrack as well. The London soundtrack is wonderful. In fact, I was going to play that here, but I might save that for another list later if we talk about music. But I really like it. The combat system is very standard. It's sort of turn-based, wacky, smack, you know, that kind of stuff. But it has a nice little judgment ring thing, if I remember the name correctly. I don't know, I'll Google it later. Where there's a circle and a spinning dial goes round and you've got to hit various points. Simple QTE thing. But it can be quite intense, especially if you're fighting God and his lovely angel friends and all manner of frightening monsters. And you've got to hit those rings to do damage and stuff. It's cool. It takes the turn-based thing and actually change it in a way that feels like an evolution and a bit more dynamic rather than some of the desperate meandering that Square Enix has done with a lot of its RPGs of late. I say a lot of its RPGs, it's not brought many out, has it? 2. Dead Space. Now, Dead Space is a last-gen game. And some of those last-gen ones aren't necessary, but let's face it, you get Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2, Dead Space 3 on one collection, and you are laughing. You know, you maybe not laugh as much with Dead Space 3, but Dead Space 1 and 2, most certainly. Dead Space 1 has been out for long enough now, it's an old enough game, to where I feel it would benefit from the re-release treatment. Bump up its visuals, bring some of its gameplay in line with Dead Space 2. You've got yourself a wonderful game. Throw on the other two because you should. And that's a really good series. Dead Space, of course, is my favourite new IP of the last generation. It's my favourite debuting, shall we say, franchise, series, whatever, from the PS3 and the Xbox 360 gen. It's a beautiful horror game, again, at least the first two. It's obviously very combat heavy. There's some people who argue that it isn't horror at all, but it's action horror, you know, it's not survival horror. There's different types of horror. It's got some jump scares, you know, but good ones. The Necromorphs are a fascinatingly grotesque and horrible villain to fight. The whole thing with Isaac's, that's the main character, Isaac's kind of descent into brain wrongs is really, really good. It's a fine series, and Visceral did fine work on it, and it's sad that I really do still feel that EA is going to shutter them one day, But until that happens, there's always hope that they go back to the Dead Space series. And it's actually surprised me that EA, especially after sinking so much money into the series, and at one point planning it to be a big multimedia thing with comics and films and books and all this shit, haven't yet re-released it. I'd say out of the list of things that I've put here, that's the most likely one to get a re-release as a bundle. But until then, it's on this list. So let's see it, shall we? Dead Space Collection. 3, Dynasty Warriors 3. Now I know what you're thinking. You think this is a joke, but no. In many ways, Dynasty Warriors 3 is still the best Dynasty Warriors game. Okay, it's aged incredibly poorly. There's a lot of stuff that would need to be changed. You'd need to modernise the combat system, because the thing they tried for a while, where when you hit an enemy officer, you then automatically lock onto that officer, and just kind of your combo patterns get stuck on the same path of where that person's moving, was a terrible idea. And there's a lot of technical issues they'd need to fix, but really the combat is still really, really satisfying and fun. The game's maps were some of the best. They were huge. The cutscenes were hilarious. It had that bad kung fu acting. Now, I've criticised bad voice acting quite recently, but sometimes, in very specific circumstances, bad voice acting can make a game more fun. And Dynasty Warriors 3, it just fits really, really well.
A dike? Oh no!
I've wanted Dynasty Warriors 3 re-released for something like the PS Vita for a while, because I would just love to get back to that. It had the best Zhang He out of everyone in the series. He had that balance between menacing and camp that was just mwah, perfect. But yeah, Dynasty Warriors, of course, it's well known, it's one of my favourite series, and out of them all, I still have the fondest love for Dynasty Warriors 3. Bump up the visuals, of course, get rid of all the mad pop-in that came up during that game, and I'd buy it. I don't know if anyone else would, but I'd buy it. Oh shit, I should have said Gitaru Man, I completely forgot about it. Alright, forget everything I said about Dynasty Warriors 3 and pretend I was talking about Gitaru Man. 4, Lost Odyssey. That battle music was fucking fantastic. Mistwalker's Lost Odyssey was like some Xbox 360 exclusive years ago, and some critics panned it because they're like, oh, it doesn't innovate enough, as if innovation by itself is some sort of mark of brilliance. It was a standard RPG mechanically, yes. It had a kind of ring system similar to Shadow Hearts, but it was very standard. Its story had its ups, downs, and dull moments, but it was told confidently, voice acted fucking brilliantly. Whoever played Jansen was and still is a legend. I can't remember the name, I do apologise, but it was a legendary performance in this business, and any connoisseur of voice acting should look at that as the example of what to do. I don't think before or since there's been a more naturalistic and an entertaining and humorous voice actor than him. But yeah, it's a beautiful game. Back in the day, it looked gorgeous. I can only imagine how it would look if they went back and upped that up to, you know, 1080p, 60 frames per second, gave it all the bells and whistles, maybe added some new effects. It's a gorgeous production with a fantastic art style, great combat. Yes, traditional, but great combat, because being old-fashioned isn't always a bad idea, not always, and just, wow. It's still a game that has stuck with me all these years. 5, Onimusha. Did I count up or down? I can't even remember. So this is either 1 or 5. I can't remember which direction I counted in. None of them are really ranked anyway, but Onimusha is what I'm trying to say. Onimusha, now that is a series. And Capcom, given its love of milking franchises and double dipping, I mean, the fact they've not touched it in so long is quite surprising. The last time, let's see, I was living at this horrible flat where there was blood and Marmite and shit on the walls when Onimusha 4 came out. And that was a pretty decent game, but it was the first 3 that were really fan-fucking-tastic. And I would love an Onimusha collection. Maybe even throw in that, what was it, they did a Smash Brothers thing, didn't they, at one point? They had some fighting game for it. Throw that in too. I never played that one, but whack it in, why not? Anyway, it was this action series that took some bits of Resident Evil into it and threw it in there, where you're this samurai different samurais depending on which game you're playing, fighting various monsters, sort of zombified samurai and stuff, as you go and fight. You're on the trail of Oda Nobunaga, and it ties in like actual history with demonic stuff, and it's just it's fantastic. It's got some really memorable characters, Guildenstern and what was that the name of the slug-headed dude? It may have been Guildenstern. He was awesome. He talked like this a lot. It was really fun. I was going to say Samurai Warriors. In Onimusha 2, you had Gogen Dantis, the legendary swordsman, who, again, just this brilliant flourish of camp and flamboyancy, and he was just a wonderful character. Onimusha was one of the most fun series I've played on the PlayStation 2, and it's still a series that I carry a lot of love for in my heart. The combat was tight, the boss battles were really good. It was the kind of game that you just don't get anymore. You don't get a combat game quite like that, where it's not quite the flashy, showy Devil May Cry type stuff, and it's not quite the slow-paced Resident Evil type stuff, but it's this actual real nice balance between the two. Combat's a bit more methodical, there's some nice upgrade systems going on, and it's just got a real atmosphere to it that you just don't get now. And so that Capcom's left that series alone while it's so prone to fucking with everything else it's got is a surprise. But yeah, Onimusha Collection, get at least all three, get the first three on, get the fourth one on if you're feeling saucy, and throw in the fighting game for a giggle. And you got a day one buy from me, sunshine. So anyway, that was a list of 5 things. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye! Oh, and thank God for me. Let's not forget that bit, shall we?